Good morning, News Talk 1330 WLBB. We got lots to do, and I have some sound for you. I have lots of sound, actually, today, especially compared to what you're used to. Good morning, Adam Uglum here in the Community Voice Room, talking politics today. Please feel free to call in with comments or concerns as we get towards the end of the program, but I do have a bit of things to get through here before we get moving along here. The program brought to us by Tanner Health System, and today's topic is the national topic, and it sounds kind of funny to say that, but in recent months, the discussion has really come up about this whole fair share thing and this whole interventionism into the market with the government bailing out companies and the Occupy movement. That's all become very popular. Now, it's become popular and even locally here, as the Occupy movement has sprung up, at least to a degree, here in Carrollton. I noticed there was a YouTube link on Facebook when I was on Facebook one day and saw that Occupy Carrollton has had its first event, and they were scheduled a meeting up sometime last week, I guess. The video is actually about a week old or so, and it's not necessarily brand new, but not heard of. So here's what Occupy Carrollton sounds like.
Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Studies by UC Berkeley. Studies by UC Berkeley show that for over 15 years. Whenever Walmart sets up shop. Local retail workers. Lose an annual $3 billion. China's exports to Walmart. Accounted for over 20%. Of total U.S. trade deficit. For the past 10 years. Walmart currently faces lawsuits in 31 states for wage and hour abuses involving over 100,000 employees. Remember, every dollar we spend is an opportunity to vote on the values that are important to us. Do we value greed? Do we value sweatshops? Do we value an endless war? Or do we value local community? Do we value jobs for America? Do we value equality? What do you value? What do you think is wrong? Occupy Carrollton. Come speak your mind. We are having GAs. That's the General Assembly. At the square in Carrollton. Every night at 6 p.m. We're meeting this Friday at the Crystals on Maple Street at 6 p.m.
Okay, so that's basically the gist of it there, and I had to remark on YouTube. I can't help from commenting on interesting videos and sound bites like that. I had to say I thought it was a little contradictory to, for one, be anti-Walmart, a big corporation, and then simultaneously announce your meeting to be held at another corporation's restaurant, all while using a camera or phone likely made by a corporation, manufactured and built by poor Asian people in sweatshops. But I thought he was pretty on point with voting with your dollar, because we all do ultimately decide what happens with our local communities. If people didn't shop at Walmart, Walmart wouldn't be springing up where we didn't want Walmarts. So this Occupy movement, they do have a bit of the argument right when it comes to buying local, supporting your local economy, if that's what you want to do. Let people do what they want to do. If people want to buy things at Walmart, they're going to buy things at Walmart, and it's going to affect the economy in that regard. What is leading to all this, I think, is rather interesting, because I think the President of the United States even plays a very large role when it comes to facilitating or being the catalyst, I would call it, I guess, in this whole discussion about evil, greedy Walmart and greedy Wall Street. You know, and we've had this discussion plenty of times philosophically on the program. What is greed? Well, we all know that greed only describes what you desire. It does not necessarily describe what you have. Now, it depends on how you define greed, and I always make sure to define the words at which we're describing things, because it's very important to understand and make sure that both sides of the party understand the definition of both the words, because otherwise, if we're arguing about the same word with two different meanings, the argument gets completely distracted. So here is the highlights, and the best highlight I could find is actually from the president himself on his very own YouTube channel, from a speech he gave at, forgive me here with the name, Osawatomie, Kansas last week, and his discussion about giving everybody a fair shot. The president has been a rhetorical president absolutely so far. He's not been a leader whatsoever, and this is what we get, and this is what facilitates this discussion here.
This is a make-or-break moment for the middle class and for all those who are fighting to get into the middle class. Long before the recession hit, hard work stopped paying off for too many people. Those at the very top grew wealthier from their incomes and their investments than ever before. But everybody else struggled with costs that were growing and paychecks that weren't. Now, this kind of inequality, a level that we haven't seen since the Great Depression, hurts us all. When middle-class families can no longer afford to buy the goods and services that businesses are selling, it drags down the entire economy, from top to bottom. We need to extend a payroll tax cut that's set to expire at the end of this month. If we don't do that, 160 million Americans will see their taxes go up by an average of $1,000, and it would badly weaken our recovery. Today, thanks to loopholes and shelters, a quarter of all millionaires now pay lower tax rates than millions of middle-class families. Our success has never just been about survival of the fittest. It's about building a nation where we're all better off. We pull together, we pitch in, we do our part. We believe that hard work will pay off, that responsibility will be rewarded, and that our children will inherit a nation where those values live on.
This guy kills me. I don't get it. This guy totally kills me. It's so funny. What's funny is I wanted to play the video live as opposed to pre-recording it and then airing it from the Scott system, because in the video there's a chart displayed that shows the rise in the change in income of the top 1% and where the other percentage lies. I'm not even sure which graph they're showing for the bottom because, of course, there's no citations and no sources, so I can't tell you. But basically the argument there is that, look, the wealthiest 1%, their income grows like crazy in the last 31 years, and the middle income grows steadily over that same time period. Now, there's 4- and 5-year periods in his own graph that shows the wealthiest 1% losing income at certain periods of time, but I don't see any sympathy from the president for the 1% when they lose money over 3 or 4 years. And also funny to me is that the graph stops in 2005, 2006 or so, which is kind of funny because the income of that portion of millionaires in the country that was around 1.4 million or so per year in income fell to $1 million. So it fell by almost 50% over, since the financial collapse. In the last 4 years, the income of the top 1% who earned about $1.4 million a year fell 50%. But, of course, that's not part of the discussion that's being constructed here. So, lastly for you, I've got one more soundbite, and we'll come back from the break, and we'll talk more about this discussion on the national level that's being facilitated by the president about this wealth inequality, this unfairness, the greatest inequality in income, he's calling it, the greatest income gap since the Great Depression. He's really trying to channel Teddy Roosevelt here. And as the president's explaining, in Teddy Roosevelt's era, this is another portion of his speech. It's a very long speech. It's about an hour, as they usually are. They're very long. And here I quote him. Some people thought that massive inequality and exploitation was just the price of progress. But Roosevelt also knew that the free market has never been a free license to take whatever you want from whoever you can. And he's right. You should not be free to take whatever you want from whoever you can, but I got news for you. Nobody's taking anything from anybody. Taking implies stealing, theft, coercion. It implies force, that there's some initiative of force, that somehow greedy Walmart or greedy Bank of America is forcing people to get home loans from Bank of America, forcing people to buy their groceries at Walmart, or forcing people to do anything at all. Really? This is the kind of language that comes from the leader of our country, that he rails against the industries who provide hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth for retirees, for people who have invested in Walmarts in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Hundreds of thousands of jobs, not only here, but around the world. This is the language coming from our president. You know, and he is right. Even though today there are people who believe they should have a free license to take whatever they want from whoever they can, they do exist. They're called Democrats. They aren't the corporate banks and folks like that. Now, those who receive bailouts, that I can understand with, and I agree with the Occupy movement on this. Bailing out the banks, not a good thing. That is taking from people. However, there's another side of this argument, too. The banks wouldn't have wanted to be bailed out, and I bet you the government wouldn't have bailed them out if the banks hadn't said, hey, look, 16 years ago, you told us to make loans that we knew would be toxic assets. So here we are in a financial collapse thanks to government policies, and you're wanting us to pay the bill? I don't think so, buddy. And there you have the bank bailout. That's exactly how that argument was framed. We'll be right back after the break, and we'll talk more about what is this fairness the president speaks of. All right, and we are back. And I got to really take a step back here and refer back to that Occupy soundbite I played for you a moment ago. You know, and in watching the video is on YouTube. It's Occupy Carrollton's first action. You can look for it. In watching the video, it's very interesting to just observe the people who do this. The folks involved in this, the one guy who's really shown in the video, I mean, just looks like an absolute slob. He's got his baggy pants on. I think he's wearing slippers. You know, he's got a beanie and a sheet of paper to read from. And what's also amusing to me is the guy's voice is actually pretty good. He's very loud, and his diction's not bad. And his mic check, this whole human microphone thing they do, this Occupy movement, where one person says one thing, and the zombies, the idiots following the one person, mimic him in order to amplify his voice by using 5 or 6 or 30 voices to follow the other person. It's very interesting how this correlates, I think, to the kind of droneism that follows the Occupy movement. You know, follow me into the chasm, my dear followers. But honestly, the human microphone effect wasn't as loud as the guy's voice, which I thought was kind of interesting. But anyway, the guy looks like a total slob. And again, it's contradictory to say, hey, we're anti-corporation, but because one of our members works at Crystal's, we're going to have our meeting at another corporation's restaurant. I don't understand how these people can just talk out of both sides of their mouth, and they don't even know it. I don't think. I'm not even sure. But it brings up this whole topic of this whole fairness, this discussion about fairness. And really, I would like to ask the president, what is the aim of increasing the taxes on all these millionaires who pay less taxes, or lower tax rates than those earning less than them? Now, I can tell you right now that we all know, regular listeners of my program know that the top 1% pay more taxes than most of the bottom 90% of the income earners. The top 1% pay 40% of the income taxes. So the minute you're out of the top 10%, you're paying less than the top 1% do, all of you put together. So when we want to talk about fairness, let's also keep that in mind. I have a full report here from the IRS that talks about the change in individual income taxes in the last couple of years as the most recent data has been recorded. And we'll get into that, but first I want to play a sound clip for you. T. Boone Pickens is an interesting guy. He was on the MSNBC program last week, and just watching the clip, I don't understand how this show is still on the air on MSNBC. The hosts of the program are absolute morons. I don't understand how they are still on the air. It's cheesy and spiteful. I really don't get it. The blonde chick on the left really just drives me nuts watching this clip. But the sound from the clip is here. We're talking about fairness with T. Boone Pickens on the MSNBC program. This is last week.
Peggy Noonan still with us, really back at the table, and look who we have here. Joining us now, the founder and CEO of BP Capital Management, Boone Pickens. Good to have you back.
Boone Pickens has a question this morning that has nothing to do with Oklahoma State or Alabama. Your question is for the president. What's your question for the president?
The president's confusing me. Every time he's on TV, he says that the rich should pay their fair share.
What's wrong with that?
Well, I don't know what fair share is. That's what's bothered me. I always want to be fair. And historically, I've been a very fair guy. I'm 83. I still go to work in the morning at 8 o'clock. I have 150 people work for me. And someplace in here, I feel like I'm letting the country down. And so I need to know what they want.
Well, we could start with taxes.
Well, okay, so let's talk about taxes. What
like
percentage? What percentage of what you make? Like Warren Buffett pays like 18% of what he makes, 17% in taxes. So is that fair? Or should he pay 35%?
Well, let me take you back. After I was 70 years old, I paid $665 million in taxes. Is that fair?
The look on their faces in this video is beyond priceless. This guy has paid $665 million between the ages of 70 and 83 in taxes. So how is it fair for that person to pay that much in taxes? I mean, most people won't earn more than a few $1,000,000 in their entire lives. And that guy paid over $600 million in taxes by the time he was 70? I don't care what your tax rate is. I would say that's kind of fair for one person to generate that much tax revenue for the government. Not that that's what income should be for at all. But really? Where's this whole talk of fairness? I don't quite have time to go through this entire IRS report talking about fairness, but here's kind of a sum up from a new tax foundation study, all IRS data. As I mentioned on the president's speech in his video clip, it's one of his new ads for the campaign, talking about this whole growth of the top 1% of Americans. In actuality, it hasn't grown at all in recent years. The income earned by the top 1% of Americans has declined for 3 years in a row, while their average tax rate has actually increased, according to the new IRS data. The average federal tax rate for those reporting at least $350,000 in income has increased from 22.5% in 2007 to 24% in 2009. Whoa. Hold on a second here. I'm an Occupy guy. Well, I'm not really, but I'm pretending to be for the point I'm trying to make here. 24% for the top 1%? That's not what they're supposed to be paying. They're supposed to be paying 36.7%, I believe, is their federal tax rate. How are they only paying 24%? See, they're cheating the tax system. Well, you see, no, they're not, because the tax system is very similar for everybody in these tax brackets, because the effective tax rate is far different for everyone than it is for the top 1%. Now, if you're earning $50,000 a year, you're pretty much not paying any taxes at all after the tax deductions and the tax credits you get and the benefits that you get from the government in the form of transfer payments, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, things like that. The bottom half of the income tax payers in this country pay zero. You can file an income tax return and pay zero taxes after deductions and things like that. So the top 1%, again, pay 38% of all of the income taxes. So somebody down the hill ain't paying a whole lot, is what I'm trying to say here. Nationally, the average effective income tax rates were at their lowest levels since the IRS began tracking them in 1986. The average tax rate for returns with a positive liability went from 12.2% in 2008 to 11.1% in 2009. Here's one summary from the IRS guy who compiled all this data. During a time of economic downturn, we expect to see significant changes both in total income reported and the share of taxes paid by those with the highest incomes. Unlike middle-income wage earners whose incomes and tax liabilities are fairly steady, high-income people tend to realize significant capital gains that fluctuate wildly with the economy, causing their income tax liabilities to fluctuate as well. So as he says in the report, this should really be taken with a grain of salt, because the top income group actually has a lower average effective income tax rate than the rest of the top 1% of returns, because of these extremely high income returns are more likely to have income from capital gains and dividends, which are typically taxed at lower rates. It is worth pointing out that in the case of capital gains and dividends, income derived from these sources has already been taxed once by the corporate income tax, which is not included here. So again, I go back to this MSNBC idiot on the program who said that, Warren Buffett's effective tax rate is like 17, 18, 19%. Well, okay, so first we have to completely ignore that Warren Buffett probably pays billions of dollars in taxes every year. Oh, and we also have to ignore that he's currently fighting a tax withholding battle with the IRS in court. He owes hundreds of millions of dollars in back taxes on behalf of his company. So he clearly enjoys paying taxes if he's fighting back taxes. So he's the biggest hypocrite I think I've ever seen. But again, when we look at this whole capital gains rate, why this argument is even a prevalent national topic, I don't understand at all. Because again, first, capital gains are have been taxed once already. You have to earn income in order to put it in the stock market, in order to earn money on it, to then pay capital gains on it. So whether he earned it through his corporation or whether he earned it as income from his corporation, it was taxed the first time. And then if that's all he did was invest it for the next year and earn capital gains on it, remember, he's already paid taxes on the income with which earned him the new money, which he's also paying taxes on through capital gains. Frustrates the ever-living out of me. We'll be right back after the break and talk more about what fairness really is with facts and data after the jump. Stay tuned. Adam Uglum here, a little angry about this whole fairness conversation. Alrighty, and we're back with about 6 minutes actually, left in the program. The number 678-601-8255 if you'd like to call and comment or ask a question. Going over some of the numbers here before we leave, for national news coming up at the top of the hour. If you're just tuning in, you've really missed a kind of heated program talking about the whole fairness argument. I'll be sure to upload the video. I'll make a video with a slideshow for YouTube. If you'd like to check out my website, it's libertariat.wordpress.com. This show will be available as a YouTube video on my website later today. So be sure to check that out if you missed the earlier part of the program, because you really missed the core part of what leads to this whole fairness discussion. We're talking about the IRS data here, and I've got it right in front of me, and I'm just going to go through this with you because it's really important to talk about what this whole fairness thing means. And again, we all know that the top 1% of tax returns paid 36.7% of all the federal income taxes in 2009. In 2008, those figures were 38% and 20%, respectively. Both of those figures, share of income and share of taxes paid, were their lowest since 2003, when the top 1% earned 16% of adjusted gross income and paid 34% of the individual income taxes. Each year from 2005 to 2007, the top 1%'s constantly growing share of income earned and taxes paid set a record. From 2008, the reversal of this trend continued in 2009. In fact, the income share for the top 1% of tax returns was lower in 2009 than in 2000, largely due to differences in capital gains. Another indicator of this reversal in the income tax shares of the top 1% is that in 2008, the top 1% no longer pays a larger percentage of total income tax than the bottom 95%. This trend was exacerbated by the aforementioned precipitous drop in adjusted gross income in 2009 in the 1%. Again, the wealthiest ones are not getting wealthier right now. Some are, and they're being highlighted as examples. We are making rules for the exception. It really bothers me to make rules for the exception. It is bad policy. It's really easy to hold up one person, i.e. Warren Buffett, hold his face up and say, look, even the rich guy says we need to pay more in taxes. And using that guy to make a policy that affects the entire country? Are we that thick-headed? The top earning 5% of taxpayers, those with adjusted gross incomes equal to or greater than $154,000, however, still paid far more taxes than the bottom 95%. Are there people who are exceptions and pay zero taxes? Yes, there are. But as a whole, generally speaking, the top 5% earned 31% of the nation's adjusted gross income, but they paid 60% almost of the federal individual income taxes. Since 2001, the IRS has also been presenting data on a small subset of the top 1%, the top 0.1%, the top 10% of the top 1%. In 2009, this top 0.1% filed 137,982 tax returns. So there are 140,000 people thereabouts who earn 7.8% of all the adjusted gross income and pay 17%. They pay more than their tax rate as a percentage of the nation's federal income taxes. So 140,000 people, a very small slice of the country, accounts for a sizable chunk of the income tax revenue. We're talking about the 0.1%. 1/100% of the population pays 20% nearly of the nation's income taxes. This is what we're calling unfair? You have got to be kidding me that this is coming out of the White House. This makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, unless you just buy everything that the media says, or, I can't believe I'm saying this, the president says. I don't understand how the media can let the president get away with lying to the country about this issue. I mean, you can tell by the tone of my voice that I'm not very excited about how this is really the idiotic way in which the conversation is being formed. We're going to completely ignore fact, ignore data, ignore the trends in recent years, and we're just going to make the rhetorically good argument to get the good Democratic voters out to believe everything the president says and just jump up and down because the president said it must be true. It bothers me to no end. In 2009, 59 million tax returns were filed with either positive or negative adjusted gross incomes that used exemptions, deductions, and tax credits to completely wipe out their federal income tax liability. Not only did they get back every dollar that the federal government withheld from their paychecks during 2009, but some even received more money back from the IRS. This is a result of refundable tax credits like the Earned Income Tax Credit, the refundable portion of which is not included in the aggregate percentile data in this report. Including all tax returns that had a positive AGI, taxpayers with an AGI of 160 grand a year were the top 5%, and they paid 20 some odd percent. Excuse me, they paid 60%. The top 5% paid 60. The top 1% paid 40. Again, I'm done. This argument is over. It's been over, and it drives me absolutely insane that this whole fairness discussion even plays a role. And I have to ask the president, you know, you could seize all the wealth of the income of the folks you're talking about. We'd still have $1 trillion deficit to deal with. Then what? Something's got to get cut. You absolute buffoon.